Today is October the 22nd, 2018. My name is Tanya Fincham, and along with me is Alex Bishop. We're with Oklahoma State, and today we are in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, and to interview Orvel and Virginia Sherrill. And this is part of our Oklahoma Married for Life project, so thank you for letting us come today. Let's begin with learning, we might as well start with you, Virginia. When and where were you born?
I was born in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, Tulsa County, 8/17/26.
Okay, and what did your parents do?
They were farmers.
Okay. What did they raise?
We were gardeners, and it was during the Depression, and we were surviving because I was number 8.
Oh, okay. Of how many?
They had 8 out of 11.
Out of 11, okay. That's a big family.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about the house.
Well, the one we lived in during the Depression, we had to put quilts and paper in the windows because part of them were broke out. And it was very cold where we lived.
Well, how many of you were in one room, like at night?
I slept with my sister in what they used to call a pantry.
Okay. And then, like at bath time, how would you do bath time?
We all had our baths in tubs, and we started with the littlest one and went up to about 6, and then they started over.
I guess that's just the way it was, wasn't it?
That's the way we lived.
Were your parents from Tulsa County?
They met in Texas and married in White Ripe, Texas, and they moved to Sand Springs. I guess after the 3 boys were born, they moved to Sand Springs from Texas.
And do you know why?
He went to work for the smelter in Sand Springs rather than farm, other than we lived on a lease and did our food.
Okay. And did your mother sew your clothes?
Oh, yes.
Did she? Where did you go to school?
I went 4 years in Jinx. I went 1 year to Porter and the bridge broke down. And I finished 5th grade through 8th grade at Wagner. And then we met. My dad moved in the hills. And I went to Locust Grove. And at Christmas, I was a freshman, he was a senior, Orvel was a senior, and we lived in the sticks, and the bus couldn't get to us. So he joined the CC camp, and my dad let my brother, just older than me, stay at Wagner and play football and live with the family. But he wouldn't let me go back to Wagner to school, so I was just stuck at home, and I was not happy. I wanted to go to school so bad.
Did you get to go back eventually?
I didn't get to go back to school till I got my GED while the 3 children were in college.
Well, that's good for you.
10 years I worked at Blue Cross.
Okay.
I got to go back at night.
Well, when you say the sticks,
We lived where nothing could run but a wagon.
and what was the name of the school?
When I finished 8th grade, it was called Elm Grove. But when I went to high school, it was called Locust Grove High School.
Okay. Okay, well, then let's switch gears. Orvel, when and where were you born?
I was born at Gage, Ellis County, Oklahoma, October the 4th, 1924. 7 o'clock in the morning, I think. Early riser.
And did you have siblings?
One sister, 2 years younger than me.
Younger. And tell me a little bit about your parents.
My grandfather was quite wealthy, but he lost everything in the Depression. One of the things I remember was being at his big house and all the furniture and things in the yard, and some guy up hollering, and later I realized he was being auctioned off, and he lost everything. But just before the Depression, my grandfather had made a down payment on a farm for my dad and my mother, and we lived north of Gage. One of my early memories, a truck drove in the yard and some men got out. They climbed up the windmill, took the blade off the mill, let it down, put it on the truck, took the mill off and put it on the truck. Later in life I realized that they had bought that on time payment and couldn't make the payments anymore in that Depression. And we moved away from the farm and moved in with my grandmother Malloy on my mom's side. And then we moved from out in Ellis County down to in Tulsa County. My father was going to farm with an aunt, and that didn't work out. And so then that's when we went down by Leonard and built a log house. I remember my mom and dad fussing and arguing a lot, and that was never going to happen in my life. I didn't like that.
Well, tell us about the log cabin.
On the road going now up over the hill from Leonard to Lake Bixoma, where Bixby gets their water, just up on the top of the hill, my folks built a log house. Dirt floor, no windows, no locks on the door. There wasn't anything to steal. But we found a car, an old car, over in the woods that had been stripped, and we took it. They salvaged the door glass out of that, and we sawed out and put a glass in, and then we were uptown. But my father said one morning that he was going to go look for a job, and we didn't know where he was then for several years, like 10 years before we knew where he was. And he wound up in Washington State in 1968, Virginia, and I went up and looked him up, and I visited with him. He told me he didn't ever expect to or want to leave Washington, but when he died, I had him, his body brought back and buried in the Shattuck family cemetery plots there. My mother filed for divorce and then remarried in a year or two, and we were poor dirt farmers scratching out a living. I can remember hearing my mom and stepdad talk at night about what they were going to have to do for food the next few days. I didn't want to live that kind of a life either. They had no retirement, and that was one of my aims in life, was to work for a company that had retirement.
Well, then tell me a little bit about your schooling.
Well, I started school in Ellis County in a little rural school, Lone Star. My next schooling was at Union, and then at Leonard, then at Elm Grove, and then high school at Locust Grove. I love to read. I ate up the math works. I went through the 7th and the 8th grade in 1 year. Teacher would assign 5 pages of math. I'd do 10 each day, and she told me that if I continued that, I could go take the 8th grade test, and if I passed, I'd go on. So I took 7th and 8th grade in 1 year. We in grade school, we got a new set of encyclopedias. I ate those things up. I like to read, and math was easy for me. And at Locust Grove, we graded on the curve and on everything I think I was in except English. I set the top notch on it. Some of the kids used to come and beg me to make a lower score. I couldn't do that. In my gunnery school and military, the aero gunnery is plain geometry in effect, and our test for that had 100 questions, and I aced that, and I was the first one to turn in the papers.
Wow. So in high school, what were you planning to be? What did you think you wanted to be?
I had no idea. Growing up in the backwoods, one of my teachers mentioned engineering to me, and mentioned engineer, and my mind said this was driving a railroad engine, and I didn't think I was interested in that coal dust.
Well, how would you get to school?
I walked to school all the time except at high school, and the state wouldn't let them put a school bus on a ferry boat, so we could not go to Wagner School. We had to go to Locust Grove. From my house to Locust Grove was 39 miles. And the bus picked us up in Wagner County. We went across the edge of Delaware and back into Mays County to school. High school boys drove the buses at that time.
Wow. And how far did you get in high school?
I went through the 11th grade, started the 12th grade, and bus problems. When the bus would get stuck, the boys would get out and push. If we didn't get out, the girls would get out and help us and push it out. And it was muddy and messy, and finally they just quit running the bus. And so I joined the CCC camp, which I think President Roosevelt got started to get us ready give us some training for World War II.
And where did that take you?
I was in the Wagner camp, and I was working in the garage, and we had classes of morning, and I was enrolled in the mechanic class. The civilian, Glenn Rose, was the supervisor, and he took a good liking to me and would help me answer any of my questions. And I was full of them, and I was in, if you stayed in camp on weekend, you got some extra free time through the week, and I elected to stay on weekends most of the time, and I was in camp on December the 11th when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And in January, they sent 65 of us to Paradox Valley, Colorado, 17-year-old kids driving dozers and road graders and making roads to the abandoned mines that had been, the high grader door had been packed out with mules, and they were hauling a strange ore out of there, and that's all we knew. I was, since I could type, I was in the office. I was working as a clerk and an assistant senior leader, which was like a sergeant in the Army, and we got paid $30 a month. They sent 15 to our parents. We got 15. My mother saved mine for me. If you could get a job that paid more than that, you could get an honorable discharge. And then long in February or March, I went down to Silverton, Colorado to visit an uncle and aunt, and he got me a job working in Shenandoah and Davies Mining Company. And I made the least I would make was $4.80 a day, and a lot of people in Oklahoma were still working for $1 a day at that time. That was 1941 and 42, and
while you were in camp, were you actually in a tent or did you have a cabin or what?
No, we had barracks.
Barracks.
We had barracks. But we wore old Army uniforms. We stood inspections. We had classes of morning and we had drill. We fell out and had roll call and inspection just like the Army. We had short order drill. And then we went into our civilian stage of work. The Wagoner camp was a soil conservation. The guys built ponds and reworked erosion places and sodded, and but Colorado camp was road building.
Well, how long would you be in the camp? I mean, how long was your commitment?
I would sign up for 6 months at a time.
6 months.
And I didn't quite complete 6 months until I had a better job.
Well, did you know any of the boys that went with you? Any of the
Yes.
other Oklahomans?
Yes, yes.
Did you stay in touch with them when you came back?
No,
No.
no.
Did you two already know each other by that point?
Oh, yes, yes.
So how did you two meet?
My parents bought 60 acres for $250 and made some down payment. We had some cows. That got us through all of the Depression years up to then. And the next farmer next to us went to Boynton and put in a used clothing store and a shoe shop. And Virginia's father leased their farm. And I went down to Boynton and helped him get set up and all. And when I came back, well, she was living there where the Joyce family had lived, and we just met by being in the community together.
When I first saw him, he was shining his shoes. And I told his sister, I almost didn't come. And he turned around and said, why did you come? And that was the first time I saw him.
Well, they say first impression is everything. What was your impression of him? When you did see him, what was your impression?
Well, we kids got together at different homes on Saturday night. And we were both at one of the parties, and the boy that had asked to walk me home one night was drinking, and I asked Orvel to walk me home, and that's when it all started. And when he told me good night, sweetheart, that was just the beginning.
And how old were you?
I was
14 at that time.
14, he was 16, and he got ready to go away in the CC camp, and he asked me to marry him down by the big rock. And I said, oh, my dad would kill me. So he went away, and when he got the job with his uncle in the mine, I wrote and asked him to come and get me. And he did. He bought my wedding dress. And then we got married in Wagner and caught a train to Colorado. And we stayed until he was called to the service and signed up. And I didn't want to live there when he was gone. So we moved back to Broken Arrow for a year while he was waiting to go.
Well, we should back up. So when did you get married? What year? 40.
42.
Got married in 42.
42.
July the 3rd, right? Is that what you said? July the 3rd?
July 3rd.
What else do you remember about that day? Either one of you.
Well, he told me to be sure and buy a jacket when he gave me that money. and I didn't do it. So we had to go upstairs at one of the dry goods and get me a jacket. And I remember that.
Why did you want her to have a jacket?
We were going to Colorado, and even in the
Cooler.
summertime, once the sun goes down, you need a bit of a wrap. And
So what did your dress look like?
I have a picture of it, but I didn't bring it out. But it was blue. I remember that, and I even wore it when I was pregnant.
and she bought a little pillbox hat too. I remember that.
Yeah, the hat flew off when he kissed me. The hat flew off.
And what did you wear?
In Colorado, the guys dressed up a little. I had some gabardine shirts, and I had some those were tailor-made for me, and I had some trousers that was tailor-made. So I didn't have a coat to go with it, but I was, I guess, neatly dressed.
You were a sharp-dressed man, huh? What time of the day did you get married?
It was around noontime.
At a church or at the courthouse or?
We went to a justice of the peace that was across the street from the courthouse where I got the license. Pat Williams issued the license. I had worked for a gentleman, Isom Smith, on the farm, and he and Pat had grown up in the Porter area, and he went with me. And Pat didn't question me if he'd asked for my draft card to verify I was 18. I'd have been down the drain, but he didn't ask. Years later, I discovered that Pat was my brother-in-law's uncle. My Virginia's baby sister the person she married was a nephew of Pat Williams.
Well, did you ask her dad for permission to marry her?
I didn't ask anybody. Her mother knew we were going to get married. Her dad didn't know. He wasn't. He
really didn't think we got married, but my older sister showed him the marriage license.
What was his reaction?
And then,
Said
after
she wasn't
that,
happy
every
at home
time
anyway.
he needed something done, he called us.
It took a while for him to come around, but grandchildren helped with that.
Well, did you have a honeymoon of any kind?
Well, not really. We got married and we got on the train and went to Kansas City and spent the night, the rest of that night, and sometime the next day we got a train and out of Kansas City to Denver, and I think it was 2 days there, and then we were at Denver, had a layover at Denver. Then we took a train from Denver to Montrose, and to get the train you had to go down around and come back up through the city down south of Silverton, and they put us on the bus, and we had checked, my mother had given us some quilts and bedding and some things, and we had a trunk full of that, and we kept going to the bus station for our trunk, and finally when they got ready to put a tracer on it, they said, "Oh, that's the railroad." They called down to the railroad station, and our trunk was down there, so we picked it up. But you learn some things through life.
Did you have to do blood tests to get?
No.
Didn't have to do that?
No.
And they didn't ask to see how old you were? No?
She didn't go with me. You didn't have to be together at that time. I just went in and got the license, and then she met my mother. Came with her, and my mother went with her. She's one of the witnesses, and the other witness is the girl that married her brother.
He got me a ring for $11, and then later I got one on my 10th anniversary just like it. And then on my 40th, he bought my diamonds, and he bought his.
Well, how did he pop the question?
How did
I just asked her, would you marry me?
he always tells me he doesn't remember it.
It's a good excuse.
I said, do you remember the big rock we stood by? And he said, yeah.
And disappointed, I guess, when you said not yet. Couldn't yet. Just understood it. Do you remember? Did you have vows when you got married? Do you remember anything about those?
It was just a simple wedding. Back in that day, they had justice of the peace that could marry and settle little disputes that people had, and sometime later, I don't remember when, but sometime after World War II, they abolished the justice of the peace. I worried about that sometimes, but we knew a pastor and his wife then, a Baptist preacher that at one time was over the Tulsa Baptist Association, and he and his wife was married by justice of the peace, and they didn't have another ceremony until their 50th, and they had a new ceremony at 50. So I guess justice of the peace is legal and as good as others. We hope.
And then once you got married, take us. What happened after that? After you got married and got to Colorado, what came next?
Well,
He worked nights. You worked nights.
I worked 2 weeks days and 2 weeks nights.
And he had to sign up for the war.
And then when I was 18, I had to register for the draft. And around October about the last week of October, we had a big snow, and from the mill house up to the mine was 2 miles. They had 4-mile endless cables running through that tram, and we rode those ore buckets up, and they had run the buckets that was in the tram house through the mine entrance to clear all the snow off of the cables, and then they started taking the guys up, and I was usually in about the 3rd bucket, and for some reason that morning I hung back, and on the empty side coming back down, a bucket jumped off, and there was pull ropes in each tower that you could pull to stop it, and they had stopped it. Someone had pulled it and stopped it, and the old tram boss started it back up, and you could hear all the guys screaming bloody murder up through there, so they shut it down, and all of us then that had not started up the hill yet went back to town, and they had to send a crew out on foot and go with blocks and tackles to get that bucket back up on the trolley line, up on the cable, and I did not go back to work. At that point, we decided that it was time for us to come home, and the kid across the street from my uncle and aunt had bought a 29 Chevrolet coupe that had been in storage for years. He gave $60 for it, and we had already took our stuff down to the train station to come home, and I offered him $100 for the coupe, and he just, that $40 extra got him, but I drove away with the 29 Chevrolet, so we come home with a car at that time. That was my first automobile.
What color was it? Black color?
The original had been painted over. It was a tan sand color, and didn't have a heater in it, but it was equipped with 6-ply tires since it was out in the mountain country, and that was our first car.
We settled in Broken Arrow, and he worked for the railroad. How long? A year?
No,
6 months?
Maybe 6 months. I was working for the Katy and I got a call to come to and report. Broken Arrow and Bixby was combined and the draft office was in Bixby. And we were all ready and I got a card the day before I was supposed to report. It said they'd had enough volunteers and that they would call me later, and so I was off about another 3 months before they called me, and at that point I went to work there in the Yonkers area on the K-O&G Railroad, and that we had floods that year, and we were trying to rebuild. We were rebuilding the railroad, and I was working on rebuilding. There was 4 of us on the crew that could drive spikes, and we were spiking about 14 hours a day. When the old foreman said, let's go in, we dropped them mallets and was glad to go. And when I went in the military, they wanted me to go in the railroad reconstruction, and I did not want that. But I had learned while I was at Fort Sill that if you made a request for cadets and could pass the test, you were accepted, and I asked. And
That Gloria was born.
I reported on June the 21st, and she was born at 4 o'clock on June the 22nd. And I didn't get to see her till about 2 weeks. You came down to Fort Sill. I got to see my daughter.
Born at my mom and dad's house. Paid the doctor $50. And he said the doctor didn't want me to follow him around. I was going to go to South Dakota, and then my doctor said no. And I said, why? Because of the weather? And he said, no, you'll just get pregnant again. So, sure enough, I followed him to South Dakota, Denver. I stayed with a family in Denver, captain and his wife, and took care of their 3 kids. And then I went home, and then I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and I left Gloria home 3 weeks. But I worked it, that's when I got my Social Security card. I worked that 3 weeks in a little dining hall. And then I went to Lake Charles, and he flew from Lake Charles, and so I got pregnant while I was at Lake Charles. So I wrote and told him about it, and he said, well, you got to do something. And I said, it's already done. And so Ward was 4 months old when Orvel come home.
I was in France when he was born.
Mm-hmm. So I lived in a 1-room garage, $15 a month. Only got 50. And cold water, no bath. And I sewed the children's clothes with a needle and thread. And it was hard days. But we survived.
Was the $50 from being married, was it through the service that you got the $50?
And when Ward was born, I didn't get anything for him until after he got home, and they said they sent too much, so I had to send some back.
Well, when he actually left to go overseas, do you remember that day?
How did you say goodbye?
Remember the last day we told each other bye? He didn't look back. My oldest brother took him to the station.
Well, when her brother lived about like 3 city blocks out in the country from her mom and dad, and she was staying with them when I reported. And she walked part way up, and I hugged her and kissed her bye, and when I turned and walked away, I didn't look back. When I went to see my mother, and she walked a ways up the road with me because I was leaving the car at their place and walk back over to Virginia's folks where she was. And when I told my mother goodbye, I did not look back. I don't know if I'd have left if I hadn't looked back.
We had one year that just letters, and a lot of them were cut to pieces from him because there were things he wasn't supposed to tell.
And how long were you separated then?
A year.
Never talked. He sent me a telegram when he got back in the States. And while he was waiting to be discharged, he paid some guy to bring him up overnight. When I opened the door that night, he said, "I gotta go back." And I said, "I had hoped I'd never hear that again."
I was assigned to a Lieutenant White's crew at Shreveport, and we were a 6-member crew, and they shipped us to Lake Charles Subbase, and when we got there, they pulled me off and put a boy named Hicks in my place, and I worked in the office for about 3 months, as I recall, until I was placed on a crew again. And the planes were pretty well worn out, and they had plane trouble, and Lieutenant White set it down in the sandbar Mississippi River, and Hicks was killed. And that was the assigned seat. I looked back on what I thought was disappointments and found it to be blessings instead. And if I'd went through the pilot program, I'd have probably made D-Day, and as it was, I didn't go over until January following that. I flew 11 missions before Germany surrendered. D-Day was on June the 6th. Germany surrendered on May the 7th. It took us 11 months and 1 day to whip them. And
But your group was booked to Bob Berlin 3 days in a row, and the weather was bad, and they surrendered the 3rd day, and they didn't have to go.
we didn't expect to survive a Berlin bombing, because Germany had everything they had left pulled up around Berlin, so it would have been a disaster.
And then he had one other bad day. Remember?
April the 12th, 1945. You remember what happened that day?
I don't. Do you, Alex?
President Roosevelt died.
Wow.
And I remember it because our weatherman wasn't exactly correct, and we got into a terrible storm, and turned darker than night, and we almost collided with another plane, and the prop wash flipped us over from it. Our navigator said if he could have reached out the plastic, he could have touched the other plane. And we were barrel rolled, and as far as I know, we're the only B-26 crew that ever barrel rolled and come out. We come out right on the ground. When the bomb bay doors opened, it is very cold back at the tail, and after we recovered and had went a little ways, I called and asked if the bomb bay doors was closed. The pilot had salvoed the bombs. That meant they were dropped and would not explode. And they checked, and they said the light's off, but when they checked it, the bomb bay doors wasn't closed, and they tried to mechanically crank them closed. They wouldn't go. When we got back, a lot of the rivets of the plane was was popped and the fuselage was twisted, and they pulled the engines off and junked the rest of it.
A lot of close calls.
That's war.
I know.
And when he come home, they come home on a boat.
I went over as a passenger on the 17 crew. There was 11 men crew, and they put me on as a passenger on one. They put our bombardier Jerry Vath on as a passenger on another one, and our crew picked up a full-fledged navigator, and they put gas tanks in the bow bay, and they took a new B-26 from Savannah, Georgia to Natal, Brazil, and then across to Africa, landed on a gravel strip. Then from there they come up the African coast and out in the international waters around Spain and landed in England. I'd been there about 2 weeks when the rest of the crew. We left Bangor, Maine at midnight. Was supposed to land in Wales, and the weather was bad, and they diverted us down by London. And when we come out of the clouds, we were right on the rooftops, and the pilot is saying, we're out of gas, we need to, they're talking to a tower, and he said, we're out of gas, we need to get this thing on the ground. And the co-pilot says, hey, look, there's a runway straight ahead, we're lined up. We landed. They parked us, we went in, they cooked us a meal. While we're eating, word came that a nearby airport had someone in a pattern and lost them. And we're getting ready to go to bed, and they come get us. We were talking to one tower and landed on another airport, but I suppose things were so hectic that whoever landed, they just took care of them. They took us to operations and told us that he had to take it up and go land where he was scheduled to land. And 19-year-old kid standing there, you know, this whole crew, and the pilot says, well, get your crew out and gas me up. I've got less than 25 gallons in each tank. I don't have enough to warm the engines up. So they made some more telephone calls and let us stay overnight, and the next day then I went to staging area, and I was there about 2 weeks before my other crew came up. My crew was made up. Bill Newton was a pilot. I don't know about him. The co-pilot was Leonard Young, and he was from Arizona, and he'd been to home on emergency for a family funeral, and he was driving at night, and lights went out on his car, and he had an accident, wound up in the hospital. George Romeline was the radio gunner. Jerry Vath was the bombardier navigator. They were on a crew that sat down with emergency at New Orleans, and they slid into the water retaining wall there, and 2 of that crew was killed, and 2 of them was messed up and discharged, and those 2 recovered, and they were on the crew. Etheridge was the engineer gunner, and I don't know what he had done. He'd done something that was busted back, lost his rating. He was a private, and he was kind of a loner, and I never did get too much acquainted with him. And then, of course, I was pulled off my crew for someone that had been delayed for some reason or other. But we flew 11 missions together before Germany surrendered.
And you were the only Oklahoman in that crew? You were the only one from
I
Oklahoma?
was the only one from Oklahoma.
And his pilot was from Ohio, and he really stuck with the war all the way. And every year he had a 4th of July celebration for the veterans, and he wanted us to come, and we didn't have the money. And finally we got enough money saved that we could go to his July, and he died.
There's 4.
But how you got home?
Well, there was a point system for the people to come home, and the ground support people had top numbers, and they got to come home first. And the first sergeant come around, they began to assign us crew guys to different jobs, and he come around and asked me, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, put me down as spare truck driver, and he had some of those famous Army words that everyone wants to be a truck driver, and I said, Sergeant, now listen to me. I didn't say I want to be a truck driver, I want to be a spare truck driver. He laughed, turned, and walked away, but in a day or two he come and he said, I want you to go to motor pool and check out a weapons carrier and a trailer, and you will pick up 6 German prisoners when they're delivered here of a morning, and you will haul the trash off. And so I worked those prisoners, and we took the trash about 7 miles down to a rugged area and dumped it. And maybe a city block further was a rise across a little creek and a flat plateau where the French were farming, and there was German prisoners working in that field, and they would try to communicate. And one day they asked me, could one of us go over and talk with him? And I thought about it a minute, and I said yes. And I said, when I honk this horn, I want you coming back on the double. If you don't show up, the rest of them's going to get shot. And so on several occasions, they went over and talked. Early on, we were, there was other things we did, and we were hauling coke, which is pressed about like an egg. This was in cold weather, a little bit of snow, and one of the guys was not working, and I said, anybody speak English? And the tall blonde kids spoke better English than I did when they finally opened up. And I said, tell him to lay under the shovel, and they talk a little bit, and he's still not doing hardly anything, and I tell him again, and they said, well, he's sick. And I said, well, the sun was shining. I said, we were in a French compound farm where farmers had lived and brought their cattle and animals in at night, and their living quarters was above where the animals stayed, and they used that animal heat to help warm their building. And I said, take your coats and go over there where that sun's shining in and lay down and cover up. And they talk with each other, and they're standing looking at me, and I have to tell them up 2 or 3 times. And finally, he did this, and I had those guys in my hand from then on, and they really were. But
just tell them how you got home on the boat.
well, that part I went over in a day, and they put us on an old tub to come home. We left Le Havre, France, and we were supposed to be home in 7 days. And it took us 14 days to get across the Atlantic. We got caught in a big storm. It was reported that 1 or 2 guys, we were told not to go out on deck, and it was reported that 1 or 2 guys got washed overboard. They circled trying to find them and didn't find them.
You sent me a case.
An anchor got jerked loose, and it tore stuff up and went down 2 or 3 flights, and if it had went all the way through, we just sunk. And the cables that was through what we call walls, I call bulkheads, and when we go down in the swell, them cables would go like this, and when we went over the crest, they'd come out like violin strings. You wondered, are we going to get home on this thing?
That's
Statue of Liberty really looked good.
when you got home, how much money did you have?
I had about 900, and you had about 900.
Mine was in a tobacco bag under the bed. And I had raised a garden and canned. We had food. And he bought a car because he had to find a job. And that's when you went to work for the company.
I had went to dealerships in Broken Arrow and Sand Springs, and nobody was hiring. The guys that got to come home in 45 had picked up what jobs. You know, everything had come to a standstill because it was all war production, and then you had to get restarted. But no one was hiring, and I was in Sand Springs and went to there was 3 dealerships there. There was a Dodge and Chevy and a Ford, and I went to them. Nobody was hiring, and I started home, and I saw 2 new Ford pickups sitting in a place, and I thought, is there 2 Ford dealerships here? I went in, and it was Oklahoma Power and Water Company garage, and I asked Mr. Bill Long about a job, and he said, I could have used you during the war. And I said, well, sir, I'm sorry, I was fighting that war. You're a veteran? Yes, sir, I guess I am. They said, sit down, I want to talk to you. He was a World War I vet, and we talked a little bit, and he hadn't said anything to me, and he reaches over and picks up his phone and says, I think I found the man I want to hire. And that's the way I got hired.
And if his car broke down, he would walk home and never see anybody, never see a car. We walked everywhere we went. I paid 80 cents to go once a month to cash my check. The cab would take me and then take me home.
And how far was home from work to home?
About 3 miles.
Wow, that's
We
It was
lived
from downtown to Prattville.
We lived over here in Prattville. The lot's vacant up on the north side of the Riddle Plant Farm, but we lived there 40 years, and I sold the property to Sand Springs Home, and they tore the house down.
But when he come home, we bought 2.5 acres for $2,500, 3 rooms. The cat could go through the screen. Cold water, no bath, 5 years. And that was we moved on a sled. We didn't have anything to move with, so we borrowed the horse and the sled from his stepfather. And when he went to work, he went to the barber shop one Saturday, and we had built a frame for the bathroom and the living room. And he got out of the car, picked up his hammer and walked out by the water fountain. And he said, I'm in the reserve, and I think I'm going to be called up for the other war. And he said, I don't want to kill any more people. And he changed. He didn't really know who he was, I don't think, for about a year. It was a hard year. He had bought a new car, and he was picking up drivers from work out to Sand Springs. And he was going on Saturday night to the car races, I thought, but it didn't turn out always. And we had a hard year, but I finally told him, no matter what happens, because Barbara was 3 years old, the 3rd child, I said, no matter what happens, we're going to raise these children together. And we have pictures over there of the Brush Arbor where we were saved by our old house. And we built Trinity Church, hammer and nail with the group. And we went on from Trinity 7 years, we went back to Broadway Baptist Church and stayed 40. And he became a deacon told me one day, I can't imagine going through life without Virginia. And from then on, it was just wonderful. But we had some hard years. The war was hard. Don't ever forget that World War II, men come home mixed up. It was not the same. And we all had to make adjustments. And we all paid for it. We all paid for the war.
Well, what about parenting during that time? How did you handle the kids while he was over in Europe?
Well, they were small.
Mhm.
A lot of problems, you know, with small ones.
It was very hard until we got a bathroom and hot water. We had 2 in diapers, no throwaways.
But
And
we have never had a house mortgage.
we have always, he's been a good manager. And once I bought a purse for $1 and I didn't have $1 to go in it and I cried. And he taught me how to save money and be a manager. So you were going to tell him what I said to you about the checkbook. What did you say?
Well, it's been in the last 2 months, and I had some reaction, I guess, from all of this radiation. And the next morning she said, "You didn't tell me last night that you loved me." And I said, "Dear,"
And I said I cried all night.
I said, "Dear, when I quit loving you, I'm going to take your checkbook away." So I checked with her a few days, see if she still has her checkbook. But we say we love each other a few times every day.
Oh, how do you define love?
Like heaven.
Uh,
It's next to heaven. First it's the Lord and then it's marriage.
I enjoy being with her. I enjoy doing things for her. I want money in the checkbook for her.
He takes care of the Edward Jones and I take care of the budget and the bills.
And
We
but
manage.
the one good thing that happened
Yeah,
financially in our life was in 1968, public service.
58.
1958, public service started the thrift program, and we could put 2, 4, or 6% of our salary in, and they matched 50% of that until 20 years of service, and they matched 75. Now we had 3 children at home, and I was a manager at that time, but didn't make very much money. And I came home and talked to her about it, and I said, I really don't see how we can do this, but let me get in it and let's try it for 6 months, 3 months at least, and see how we do. I said, if I put 6% in, I'm going to pick up 3% salary that I don't have to work any harder for. So I signed up, and in that time I got a pay raise. And we worked through it, and so from that point on, we've been active in the Baptist Church ever since the fall of 1946, and we've put 10% at least, and sometimes more, into that, and I went into the thrift program, and after we were in there a while, and I can't tell you exactly, but maybe 2 or 2.5 years, government allowed us then to go to 10%. The company didn't match that other 4, but it went in tax-free. My amount at that time was $5,200, and we had savings at Citizens Federal Savings and Loan in Sand Springs, and I went in and talked with them, and they said, that's better than we can do for you, and we suggest that you do it. And I turned in my check for $200, and I got several telephone calls telling me I was the first person in public service to pick up that option.
But he built a living room and bath, and then public service had electric stoves for sale. So he bought me one, and I said, I want a new kitchen. So he built me a new kitchen and a bedroom, and they were beautiful. I've never had a kitchen like that since then. And he worked very hard day and night getting all of our building to live in. A year or two before we moved, we had a fireplace built. But when we moved to the farm, he had gotten a little bit of money from his mom's passing. And then we had the thrift plan. And we were able to pay cash for 80 acres and a nice home that we had to remodel. And we lived there 28, 29 years.
Wow.
We baled hay. We ended up with 300 acres. One day he come home and I said, I just bought the corner 40 you wanted. And then we bought several 20 acres, and we had 300 when we left.
So did you farm it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Baled hay in 110 degrees.
I had,
We got up at 5 in the morning and cut cedar trees, and I drug them a football field.
up to 6
At 11 o'clock we went in and showered and went to bed.
What about the kids? Did you make them have
Oh,
chores?
no, they were out. They were on their own.
They're
but
on their own. Wow.
our kids learned to work at home.
Our baby girl bought 6 acres. She had remarried and they moved out by us, but when we were getting old, she said, Mom, Wayne doesn't like to keep this 6 acres up, so I've got to move, but I don't want to go and leave you. And I said, yes, you go first, and then I'll follow you. And that's what we did. So she lives in Acres, Angus Acres, 3 miles down the hill.
Well, when they were growing up as children, who was the disciplinarian?
Both of us.
He didn't have a father. He really didn't know a lot about it. He worked hard, but he was hard on Ward.
He turned out pretty good.
But he learned how to be a perfect grandfather. But when you don't have a father, how do you learn to be a father? If you don't have a mother, how do you know to be a mother? But we made it through. And he even let Ward drive to Oklahoma City one time to a ball game.
Yeah.
I would
Well-
never let him.
On his own?
No, he had three buddies with him.
I bet you worried.
Well, I taught her to drive, and I guess I taught the children to
I was
drive.
29 when I drove.
We had a long driveway. Longer than the football field, I guess, and I let the kids back up and get the paper in the mail and drive back down, or drive up and back down. So they had the feel of the car. The automatic transmissions were coming in about that time when we still had standards. On Gloria's senior year, they were working on the float, and they needed something, but there was nobody that could drive a standard transmission. And finally, she heard that, oh, I can drive a standard transmission. She got to drive a pickup. She come, oh, you just sat up there. And I said, see, I told you you needed to know how to drive both kinds of cars. Ward was in college, and we had bought a '53 Ford new, and I had overhauled the engine on it, and we let him take it to school in his second year. And he comes home wanting a new car. And so that was out of the question. But we allowed people to bring their private cars in at the public service shop and work on them. So on a Saturday we went over and we steam cleaned that Ford. And I had him take it down to the Mercury place and check it in, and the man said now to have it undercoated, and the man said, now we may have to steam clean that. He said, mister, I guarantee you could eat off of that under there. And he, oh, you're the Sherrill boy. Our church was putting in new carpet. This car was two-toned green, timber-lined green on top and seafoam green on the bottom. And they had took up some green and white carpet. And I said, go down and see Mr. So-and-so, our building superintendent at church, and get some of that carpet to pay him whatever he wants. Well, he gave him carpet, so I took that to a upholstery shop that we did public service did business with, and they cut it and fit it and hemmed it. The car came with rubber mats, so we had that, and then we sanded it down, and I got my painter to paint it, and we went over on a Sunday then. He painted on Saturday, and we went after church on Sunday to pick it up and walk in the body shop, and Ward said, Dad, that's still wet. I said, no, I don't think so, but touch it real easy, and you know, it just...
Oops.
Was time up there or something? and I mean, he had a finish on it like a mirror. And so he was quite pleased to drive the car after he had some elbow grease and equity in it.
Well, when he played ball those 4 years, he didn't get to come home much, so we let him take the car the second year. And Gloria never had a car till she was married and they bought a car. But her boyfriend that she was engaged to had a car, and Orvel kept it up, and she went to OBU the first year, and then she switched to Northeastern.
Where Jim was.
And
his father died when he was in high school, and so I kept their car up for him.
So where did Ward go to school?
Stillwater.
He was at OSU, went to OSU?
He played basketball under Mr. Iba.
Ward was the first boy to sign a letter of intent.
When they started that.
And Mr. Aubrey said he'd always remember Ward because he was the first one. And he signed his intent in the kitchen where I cooked at school. And his basketball coach didn't have very good language. And he said, blankety blank, if this don't work, don't blame me. But he signed it in the kitchen where I worked.
At school.
We went together 5 years in high school, and I cooked and watched after them. They couldn't get in trouble.
Well, I
made 105 a month.
At what high school?
Charles Page High School.
So what years was he at OSU?
He went in fall of 63, and he was there till 67 or 68. Linda was getting her BS that he's married to. And he got his master's while she was finishing.
Okay.
And then when he went to Northwest in Kansas, it was a new school, and he helped write the curriculum for the science program. But they didn't like a coach in their science curriculum. And they did everything they could, but he stayed until he won a championship. And then he went back to one summer and learned to teach driver's ed. And the last year he was at that school, he taught driver's ed, and he had written their curriculum.
And had electric set in there. And then Now, our grandson and his wife live up here on the corner, and they're Tulsa police officers. And so there was target practice, and we had a place on the creek that was washed out in a big bank there that was perfect for target practice. And we had 5 ponds for them to fish in, pitched horseshoes, we had 2 fire pits. Well, we had 2 cooking fire pits, and then a rock ring belt and they liked for me to have some hollow logs so that, so you could set them in there and the flame would come through them and sit out there till midnight and talk.
Ward says that Mom will die first because she worked so hard on the farm.
And you say you have a family picnic every year, or did you ever have any other type of rituals or family type of traditions, family traditions that you like to do?
We get together for the holidays, but as the family scatters out, some of them can't make it.
Well, thinking back when you were parents, did you ever go on vacation? Take the kids on vacation? Did you?
Yeah, but we did little short things. We
Did you ever have
on the lake and we let the kids go out and the 3 of them out in the boat with herself and fish. Barbara made a cast and lost her reel, and she just killed her. There, we'll buy you another one. Oh, come on, my reel. 2 or 3 years later, they were dragging for something, and they found that reel, but it was pretty well rusted out by then. But
we built churches the first 10 years we were
church
retired.
Church buildings.
Oh, wow.
Church buildings for 10 years. We went to Arkansas, Kansas twice, Alaska twice. The last trip was to the Navajos
When we went out.
beyond the electric line.
Wow.
And he bought an old RV. They called it a number 5, and I thought we had to be dragged up one hill. It took 20 minutes to fill the gas tank. But one day he had fixed it up, and the man drove by and handed me cash for it.
Wow.
But we got too old, and we spent 29 years at First Baptist at Manford, very active.
And
they were all fussing because we didn't stay home. So they built a big gym, dining hall, and we got pictures of all of our trips and building this building. He was up on the rafters with Les, and we sheetrocked 12 and 16 hours a day, didn't we?
Yeah. We'll go down to the restaurant and Mary go tell the cook, these guys, this crew's been working on the church, put a little extra on their plate.
And I have a picture of the playground our name is on.
Were your parents involved with religion growing
no.
up? So it's just
Well,
something as a married couple
her
you did?
parents was trunk Baptist. You know what those were? They load up the wagon and they're gonna leave home, and they gave them a letter and they put it in their trunk, but they never did do anything with it.
I've never heard
that.
No.
This is the brush arbor, and this is Trinity Church that we built with a handsaw and a nail.
Wow.
I did the building onto my house without any power tools.
So your engineering, whether you liked it or not, you ended up doing some of that.
Well, I did some things for public service that I don't know if I could do them today or
This
not.
is
Sure.
the playground that
Do you
I
want it
voted
off?
for us to
Well,
raise
no.
the money and build. And we still owed it.
Public service developed a pole line up in
$800.
Wyoming.
It
And
cost
I got a call
$4,000.
from the president
And
one
everybody
day.
gave me money for it.
His secretary said,
And
Mr. Newman would like to see you in the office tomorrow at such and
we like
such time. So
800
I'm there
finishing
with
it
my
had to be paid
notepad,
by the
and he
first
said,
of the year. So when
We
sold
need
the
a service
cattle
truck.
after the fire,
And
you
they
know,
want,
we had a
that's
fire.
what they want, X
We were in the
gallons of
Manford fire.
kerosene,
Yeah,
gasoline,
We had to sell our
diesel,
cows. Well, I paid
antifreeze,
our tithe.
all the stuff they want on
Finish it.
this. Said, do we have an old truck that we could do?
Wow.
But we
and put
joined
this
a
on?
little
And I
church
said
here
yes.
by us, Fisher
We
Baptist.
rigged out a truck to do a
It's
project and
It had
they was finished with it or it
I
didn't work out
cooked
anyway. It was
with
parked
one
in
of
the
the
yard. And
preacher's
I said
wives
yes, and I told him
at
about
high
it. And in
school.
fact, in the process of
back in the
that we
60s.
tried to use it, I'd wound up
And
putting
they had-
a new factory engine in
The
it.
dam
So it was in good shape.
caused water
So
under
I go
the
over to
church. there on
Engineering
51.
department and say, I need some help on
So they
laying this
built
thing
that
out.
turbine
And they
toward
looked at it
us.
and they said,
A new
Oh,
church.
man.
So we joined in.
we're electrical
Good,
engineers,
good.
you need a mechanical
And the pastor
engineer.
He's
Now, I
over
could've went
the
out and hired someone,
fireman
but I
and
went
the
home
police
and
chaplain.
I get the
Oh,
books
yeah,
down,
And he is a
school
policeman.
books.
How we doing? How we
And
doing?
I
so
measure
we had a
oil
little
drums, 5-gallon
Our
gas cans,
granddaughter
everything
that's a
I could
policeman
find. At
down
that point, I
here.
didn't even know how many gallons
she
were in a
works in
cubic
the
foot,
office. She's a 4
7.3.
And she does his
But I
budget.
figured
So
out, and
we
I
have
did
a
all
little
this
bit
at
of
night.
contact.
That's right.
At home. I laid out the material list, and then I go to my weld shop and lay it out with him, and boy, we buy the material and put it together and rig it all out. And another project I was on, Oklahoma Gas and Electric had a material truck, a line truck, a bucket truck, and a crew truck. Our management said, we're gonna do with a line truck with buckets added on it, what they're doing with a 2. So that's, I put the first bucket truck out on the public service, and I put the first corner mount hydraulic line trucks out. And so the crews went to the safety department, and when we were buying these digger trucks with 2 buckets on them that you took off when you put them on when you can put men up. And they had controls in 1 bucket. Now there's 3 levers up there. You've got an in and out, up and down, and rotate. And so they had controls in 1 bucket. They went to safety and said, this isn't safe for us to have a man over here without controls. If this one gets hurt, you know. Now there's a set of controls on the ground also. So I get a call to the office and they ask me, can you build controls for the other side of that? Yeah, probably. I may have to throw something away and start over, and I did. But I figured it out, and it had to be, there's a collar on this boom that if you're gonna use the digger, you latch it on and it goes out. And if you're not gonna use it, you latch it on the bottom section and the boom goes without it. So I couldn't get controls on this thing with that on there, so it has to be on and off quick. So there's 3 controls, you've got 3 cotter pins, 3 pins, snap rings, snap pins to go on that to hold it in. And I built those up and made the T-handle bolts, 2 bolts to hold that on, and then they had to put 3 cotter pins in and they could operate that thing. And I made it for 3 different manufacturers, so they were all a bit different. And I had a fella helping me, and farmers build a lot of good things, but they will just take a cutting torch and cut it off and weld it, and that's it. Before we used angle iron, we rounded the corners and we fixed it all up, we painted it, and it looked like factory. Now, some of the crews used it and some of them didn't, but that's beside my, I did what they wanted, I made them work.
Is
And then
is that the story about asking the engineers to help you?
and the the next year when they bid out some trucks, and I had went down and talked with the president, and he moved me downtown, got me out of my hard-working job, and they bid them on the next ones, and then I got a call from the company that was putting the units together in Oklahoma City, and they said, we know you built some controls, but we can't get figured out just what to do here. Can you help us? And I said, yeah, I'll get it set up and come down then tomorrow, and I'll show you what I did. And so I took it down, and they worked off of that and got it made up. We also, people would come with an idea to us, and we would take that and go with it, and they came and talked to us about a little trailer to haul wire on, and they had a rig in a small thing in the storeroom that they'd walked over, and they could put a bar through this spool of wire, pick this up and set it under there and push it down and then roll it around. And we took that idea, and three of us got busy out in the shop floor and drew this thing all out with soapstone, and built some for Tulsa, and as soon as the other areas saw them and heard about them, we was busy building little trailers that they could do. They'd been picking these up with a line truck and moving them around, and now they could do it with a trailer. And then, just a minute, and then engineering, Tulsa comes down and draws that all up off of what we built, made a plan for it, gave it an engineering number.
One PSO guy, Mr. Hall, asked him one day at one of our luncheons for his signature, and he said they should give him a gold Cadillac for all the money he saved the company.
How long were you with the company?
40 years.
40 years, wow.
And 3 or 4 or 5 days.
They weren't happy when you retired then, were they?
Well,
They
in
changed
fact,
a lot of
I worked a year and a half on contract for them.
Help close Black Fox.
I went down and sometimes I just passed by the people I'm supposed to be reporting to. I reported to people who didn't even know all the stuff I did. I went down and talked to the president, and I said, we had salary schedules. I said, my men that are good, I've got them right up at the top. In my salary range, I've worked hard. I've never been to midpoint on what my job says I'm worth. And he said, well, I'd made an appointment with him, and then I got a call, and I said, come up, if you come up right now, because things has changed, and the time you're supposed to be here, Mr. Newman's supposed to be catching a plane in Tulsa Airport, and I said, I'll be right up, and I told him, I just need a quick minute or two, and I have this question. I have no complaints of the people that I reported to, but I've never made midpoint on my salary range. What do I need to do to get there? At this point in my employment, my salary is all that's going to add to my salary range, all that's going to add to my retirement, because they only used so many years. I think they used 30 years in retirement, and the last 10 didn't add anything to the retirement check. So he said, I'll look into this, and I got 2 pay raises shortly after that. And then I get a call, the guy said, congratulations. And I said, well, what? And he said, well, you're moving downtown. I said, oh, I didn't know anything about it. So I called my boss. I said, am I moving downtown? I'm getting a telephone call. Oh, someone's talking out of turn. But anyway, they moved me downtown and put me on some special projects. And we had started Black Fox, and 3 Mile Island thing happened, and that dummy up there, everything worked like it's supposed to, but that dummy kept putting it back on. And the government pulled all of our permits and was going to make us total permit that, so they canceled it out, and I went out and helped to dispose of that property out there and get everything finished down and closed out. But I retired and wasn't finished with that, and then they asked me to work on contracts, and I went and talked to a retired vice president, and he gave me some pointers on what to do to get what I've earned. And then after I got it all worked out, then my boss said, well, we could give you $5 more an hour if you want. And I said, no, this is what I asked for, and I'm gonna stick with it. And
Wow.
I worked about a year and a half, pretty steady. Well, the first year I was very steady, and I worked pretty steady the first 6 months on this one, and then the rest of it kind of tapered off.
Was it an adjustment when he finally retired and was underfoot all day, all day?
When he went downtown, he called me every day, and I said, why are you calling me? I haven't heard from you for 40 years.
Well, I was supervising 5 shops and a paint and body shop, oil shop, and I was totally busy. Now, I had a lot of good people, but I still made rounds and did things, and I looked at all the repairs that are done on all the vehicles every day. And the first year that I was superintendent and made up a budget, I got questioned pretty heavy. Now I've got a high school diploma, and the rest of mine's in the shop. And here's all these college-educated engineers that I'm working with, and I have a pretty good memory, and I knew the driver, the vehicle. I could tell you when I was running that. I could tell you within 20 miles of how much mileage was on every car. I knew everything that had been repaired on it, and I aced right through that. And years after that, I wasn't even questioned. They took what I turned in and for replacements and all, and just went with it.
When I retired, I cooked at church at Broadway on Wednesday for Wednesday night dinner, 10 years. And then when I went to Manford Church, I took care of the funeral dinners. So I've always been somewhere in contact.
She teaches them what a clean kitchen is too.
But when he was doing Black Fox, I had garden and yard. I mowed every Friday with a push mower all day. And everyone told me I needed earplugs.
Earplugs. Well, when he left for work each morning, would he give you a kiss?
Sure. She handed me a lunchbox. I carried a lunch all those years.
We milked a cow until we moved to the farm. And I sold milk 50 cents a gallon the whole time we lived there until about a few years, wasn't it, before we moved. People come to the house and beg for milk. Some families, their children couldn't drink anything but fresh milk. And I sold eggs. I sold cottage cheese and butter. We carried butter to Tulsa, didn't we?
Yeah. We sold pears.
We sold pears.
We had pears out on the farm. Had a big old pear tree that I took 26 bushel off of one fall. It died out finally, but the trunk was, 2.5 foot thick.
But until he retired, we had a bunkhouse at the first 80, and we camped down on weekends once in a while, and we built fence around all of the property and cross fenced it, right?
Well, what would you do for fun if you're doing all this work? What would you do for
That
fun?
was our fun.
That was your fun.
Yeah.
Did go dancing?
Oh no,
No dancing.
Baptists don't dance. They
I,
don't admit it if they do. They don't admit it if they drink beer.
When I was at Blue Cross, I went to painting class on 51st and Lewis. You wouldn't go there now. After work, to art class.
They're just beautiful, the ones. I
For
love the one
10
over the
years.
fireplace. It's pretty.
That was my grandmother's pie safe, and my mom wound up with it, and then when she passed, we got it, we had it reworked, and she decorates that for the seasons, and puts my World War II joke in there for 4th of July and Veterans Day.
Well, did you ever think you'd be married this long?
No. But we just, I guess we take it one day at a time. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know.
do.
Now sometimes,
We have both lived longer than any of our ancestors that we're aware of. And
None of my brothers and sisters lived to be 65 except this last sister.
Did they all stay married to their first husbands?
no,
Let's see.
JD,
My first brother, the oldest, his wife, they had a baby and she left, and she had visitors. After he remarried, she had visiting hours, and she come and kidnapped the little girl, and they had her wreck up by Pryor and took her head off, the mother. But the child was raised, and she had a baby after marriage, and she got in the swimming pool and swam too soon after the baby, and she died. So my brother and his wife raised
their granddaughter.
Doreen, and she lives in Wagner, and I still keep in contact with her.
Well, her brother that was my age was in the Navy, and he was quarterback on the Wagner football team, and Stigler and Wagner were big foes back there then, and he was home on leave, hadn't been discharged yet. I was still in France, and he went down with a group of guys to the game, and coming home had a storm, and I don't know whether the bus got out of control of the car out of the cold, but the car and the bus collided, and he didn't survive. He survived the accident, but he didn't get out of the hospital. And
He had been on a U.S. Oklahoma. No,
but his wife was involved with someone else while he was gone. They weren't going to make it.
she was on our marriage license.
Yeah.
well, do you have any regrets? Any regrets about being married? If you had to do it again, would you do it again?
Oh, and a second, I tell some people probably we waited too long. Maybe we don't have got married sooner. Most of it's been great. I had some problems when I come home, but things change. There was 2 of us. When I come home, there's 4 of us, and
Yeah.
When he
And
left,
and
there was
she
just
didn't drive
us 2.
then,
When he
and-
come home, we ended up with 4 or 5.
she
He
didn't.
couldn't handle that.
She didn't drive then, and she gave me a grocery list, and if it just looked too high to me, and I have a hard time adjusting with prices even today. And I'd come home and she'd say, "You didn't get that." I said, "It's too much," and she never questioned me. She said,
If we needed syrup on our pancakes, I just brown sugar and water and made syrup. And if we needed dressing for our lettuce, why, I mixed mayonnaise and ketchup and cow milk and made dressing for the lettuce, salads. But
in
the first 5 years he was back, we lived off of the land. We lived off of the garden and the cow and the chickens.
well, I went to work in
Back then, the gas was $2, the water was $2, the phone was $3. Only made $119.
I went to work for $118 a month, and I signed in on-the-job training, and I went to Sand Springs School. One of the teachers taught a mechanics class at night, and I got $46 for that, but the company had a bunch of paperwork to do, and so I was in that 2 or 3 months, and they called me in and said, would you be happy if we would give you this much raise so we don't have to go through this paperwork? They bought me a set of tools, and I checked to see if I could keep my tools, and I could, and so at that point we dropped the training, and I didn't go to night school anymore, and I got the extra
But
$46.
we built our building around our house with the money that he got from night school.
It's good managers all the way around,
Oh,
aren't
he
you?
does. Edward Jones asks him every time we go, what are you going to do with all this? And I said, we may have to go to Green Tree to live. We may not get to
That's an
stay here.
assisted living place. Well, one of my prayers each day is that we are able to take care of each other. I don't know, I didn't do too good. She fell the other day.
I was barefoot in the kitchen. That's a no-no.
Well,
I go to a wound doctor at OSU tomorrow.
OSU Hospital.
Well, what do you do to keep the spark alive these days?
I thank her for all the meals she cooks every day, and at night I thank her for everything she's done for me all day just before I go to bed.
And now he dresses my arm at night.
And she's just my girl. We're just happy to be with each other. We'll sit. We don't watch television, but she crochets a lot.
We watch OSU play ball.
Yeah, we watch some of the sports, and but see, we've got kids out of colleges everywhere now, and
If Ward and Linda are here, when we moved back, Ward moved away. He always loved the water, so they went to the lake. But when they're in town, they always come by. And Barbara keeps in touch all the time, and our daughter that retired in Owasso, her and her husband, she has a housekeeper, and they come together every other week on Thursday, and I pay her $150 to clean the bathrooms and the floors. And Gloria does. She said, Mom, you come to Tulsa so many years and cook supper and clean my house, I'm going to pay you back. But her husband is not well, so I hate for her to go off and leave him.
now what day did you cook for the family that they came for years and ate? Was it what day of the week did they come?
Oh, I don't remember.
Well, while we lived over there, she cooked for the kids and the grandkids.
Oh, every Tuesday night.
Yeah, Tuesdays was she, and
And Brad would slide down the car before they got it parked to see what I was going to have. And then he and Cheryl started calling the night before. Now, what are we having for dinner tomorrow?
Well, what was your signature dish? What was your what?
well, there was usually mashed potatoes and roast.
Or,
Now, while we were at the farm, we butchered a beef each year.
now, we had roast beef and hamburger. We had meatloaf.
What was your favorite thing that she used to make?
She makes a mean meatloaf. A lot of people wants her recipe for meatloaf.
Now,
And
they used my meatloaf recipe at
But now she makes-
Manford First Baptist. didn't
she makes soup, and see, she'll put a pot of soup, and we'll eat a day or two, and then she'll add what's left. She adds something to it, so it's it's a little bit different, and you don't have the same thing every day for a week just because she's cooked a big pot of soup. It's a little something's added each day.
Well, I'm a chicken eater and he's beef, but I know he needs beef at least 3 times a week for strength. But he eats chicken too.
How did you learn how to cook? Who taught you how to cook?
I helped my mom cook from the time I was this tall.
Cool.
And
Now, she had trouble cooking for 2 when she'd been cooking for a big family. We had a lot of leftovers. But today we don't have leftovers, we have time-enhanced food.
I worked in the garden with my mother, and she kept all her canning jars under the porch, and I was the only one that had a small hand to clean the jars. So I got that job, and they were full of mud.
Well, now where I grew up, it was a sin to hire somebody to do something that you could do yourself, so I've always just done everything. I buy a used car, of course. I was told in the military and my test that I had good mechanical ability, and so I'd buy used cars and drive them 80,000 and sell them for more than I give for them, and they were in better shape when I get rid of them than
When he broke his first leg, the femur, he took the trash down on a cold January day. First time in 3 months he took the trash down. And he hit a piece of black ice. And he said, now clean the fireplace out and I'll be back to empty the ashes. Well, he didn't come back, so I went out and emptied the ashes. And I looked down at the road. I thought maybe he's down there talking to a neighbor drove by. He's laying on the ground. So I called 911 before I went down there. And he had a man flagged down to come and get me. And he said, over there she comes now. And then when he broke the other one, he had worked all day on sheetrock from a repair someone had done. And he come into the garage and I was shaking a clean trash bag to put up, and just as I started over to put it up, he's pulling his shoes off, and we never had a chair at the back door. We always went to the porch and took our shoes off. And he took one shoe off and he raised his foot up and got off balance, and he just barely brushed me and fell and broke the other leg. And the kid said, Mom, when he broke the first one, you brought him straight home. And you didn't close your eyes for 6 weeks. Now you can't do that this time. So he went to Monroe, it's a very fancy place, and stayed 3 weeks. And I had a friend at church that took me to see him, and Brad and Stephanie up here, they took me a lot. But I hated for him to stay somewhere else. When we left him, they took him straight to the dining hall and put his bib on, and there wasn't nobody in there but the cook. And in the kitchen, he doesn't remember it. But I cried all the way home. Linda Ward took me. And Linda said, I know how you feel. I had to leave my mother like that. But they really were good to him. In fact, we've talked about living there instead of Green Tree, but it's in way south Tulsa, so far from some of the kids. But we know. How do we know which one's going to go first? Only God knows. And he doesn't want to leave me, and I don't want to leave him. But we just had a new will made from 1998, the old one. So if we are in a wreck, which he's still driving, and I drive a little in Sand Springs, they could identify us the children have the right. So it's all fixed up. We've read through it. We have to go back and get it.
Notarized? Yeah.
But we're taking care of business now.
Well, when you think about young people today, do you feel there's anything that's hurting their chances to have a marriage as long as you've had?
If they've got commitment, and then if they've got, there's some give and take. I think their chances and their opportunities and their lifestyle is gonna be better than what we've had.
But do you feel there's anything that young people are doing today that are hurting their chances to stay married?
I have 2 granddaughters, we do. 2 granddaughters. Get up every Sunday morning and get their family off to church. And
I think.
our oldest daughter, she's a churchgoer. She's always been a churchgoer. She goes First Baptist at Owasso. Her husband's not able to go now. And Ward and Linda are kind of getting settled now at the lake in church. And our baby girl, she never thought church was really necessary, except Sunday morning. And she married a spoiled kid and divorced. He asked her for a divorce in 4 months. And they had a little girl, and she's one of them that's a churchgoer. And
Yeah, and the first thing she writes
she,
the middle of the month is her tithe to the church.
when her little girl, when she had her baby, they put her up on another floor and her kidneys had a lot of problem, and he brought her home and dumped her out. I went back and I found a gynecologist for her, and he saved her kidneys, and we had a baby at home, us both working, 2 months old, and his mother helped us a lot, but she went back and married him, divorced and married him again, but it didn't work out. But she knows the Lord. But right now, her husband is not well, but they did go some when he was able. But unless the new families don't take the Lord with them, they're going to have a hard time.
Is there any piece of advice you would give young people today about getting married?
No, I'd say go for it, but one thing that I think families need to learn is the phrase, "I can't afford that today."
We have up here on the corner, Adrian was on her last year of school, and a boy, homeschool, only child, from down McAllister, swept her off her feet. They were both at OSU. They bought a trailer, and he made her pay the rent on the trailer. And
The lot rental.
he had nothing to do with the family. She would go with him to his family, but he wouldn't come here. And one night she called Brad and said, "Dad, would you all come and get me?" So she wasn't quite ready to sign her divorce, and she had kind of dated this other boy during high school. Brad told her she couldn't because he was older. But Kayla, her sister, said she dated him anyway. So she went to live with him, and they come to me, and she's pregnant. And I said, "Okay, when's the wedding?" They got married. We had a church wedding. And the baby was born 1 pound and 1 ounce.
Dad was hemmed here today.
Was at St. John's 4 months, and they forgave him of the $37,000 bill. She's pregnant again, and it's gonna be a girl, and Brad helped her get a job. She works for 911, 10:30 at night till 7 in the morning. She loves it. And Brad found them a house. They're living with them, and I give them eating money. And they found them a house, and they're fixing it up, and their payment will be $450 a month. So they're getting on their feet. Our other granddaughter, Brad's sister, was at Northeastern and about ready to graduate, and she falls in love. She gets her wedding dress ready, and Ward goes down and checks this boy out. He hadn't done anything he said he'd do. And she had a very, very hard time. And then she met Nathan, and he's a church boy. And she wore her wedding dress with him. And they have the 3 little girls, one that her heart was bad and the other one that can't hear. And they are churchgoers. They go where Gloria goes at First Baptist, and they're very active. She teaches, she went 9 years to school to teach the kids that are
Speech
therapy.
She's a speech
And
pathologist.
she's setting her up her own business in Owasso. Right now she taught at one of the Owasso schools, and a mother sued her and the school for something. She went on to a private school at Bartlesville, and she's taught there 3 days a week forever. Now she's going to start her own business. We've been helping her some. And we handed them $13,000 when the little girl couldn't hear. And Ward said they've run their charge card back up again, and Orvel said, we're not going to help them anymore. But I understand why. She has to have new bulbs ever so often. So does the teacher. And it's not free, I know, I paid for mine. So, and we're helping Brad and Stephanie with groceries. And we give them the great-grandchildren all $50 a month for lunches. They don't have to pay for their lunches. And we, for a young couple thinking about getting married, so many of the men today, the boys, have their own thing. And they're going to do it, no matter what. And Brad works hard. He's worked 20 years on the beat in North Tulsa at night. He had just changed to days. But he's still got his one little thing he likes. What is it? Mustang. And his overtime money all goes for his cars. Orvel didn't do that. He brought his check home. Overtime come home. We fix the kids' glasses and tea.
Well, in my early years,
There's a lot of pressure on the young people.
in my early years, we didn't pay Social Security on all of our salary. There was a limit, and I was paid up along July or August. I was paid up, so I had a little bit extra, and that's when we got the kids' clothes and school supplies and stuff.
Now, our kids knew what we could afford. Ward wanted to go to Mickey Mantle's summer camp, but he knew we couldn't afford it. We did send Barbara to Girl Scout camp one year, but our kids knew what we couldn't afford. But now, Dawn and Nathan that run their bill back up, the oldest daughter swims everywhere. The second girl plays softball and golf, right? The one with the heart. The baby girl plays piano and I don't know what else. But I told Linda, we let our kids have one thing. And that was all. They had to choose. Gloria played the piano, Barbara was in Scouts, and Ward played baseball.
And basketball.
Yeah. And
Let them have some of their questions in here.
Oh, you're doing fine.
Well, I just have one last question. You know, what would you say? Well, when history's written, what would you like it to say about you as a couple?
We're family people. We took care of our family. We helped them. I've never seen a armored truck chasing the hearse going to the cemetery, so we're going to pass some of ours on. One of my aunts out in Shattuck, Oklahoma, when she died, they had adopted children. Their adopted children was my children's age. But we visited her. We used to go out in Ellis County a lot more often. We haven't been out there in several years now, but when my aunts and uncles were living, we were out there, and my uncle had died, and then my aunt, by marriage, had died, and she left me $5,000, which surprised me. She left me $5,000, left my sister $5,000. She had other nephews and nieces, but she didn't leave them anything. And when I cashed that check, I called my 3 kids and their spouses and said, let's go to Sutton Restaurant and eat. And we set up the date, and when we got through, I handed each one of them a check with $500 on it.
when we
Passed
sold
it on.
the farm, the Summit property,
Yeah, we shared some of that with them too.
when we moved here, we didn't have anything left.
Well, this,
One thing I think we should have done was had someone take care of the children occasionally and just got away, the 2 of us. We never did that. And I recommend it.
well, our children was just.
Do you get away once in a while? We should.
Just, our children was everything. They would come from school and say, we volunteered you to do something, to go sponsor this or take the kids. When Ward was playing basketball, they didn't have a school bus. The parents took them. We drove kids to Ponca City, to
Muskogee.
Muskogee, I don't know where all now that they were prior. We took a load of kids.
If they didn't have supper after, we paid for it. And they told us to go get gas before we picked them up, but we only went one time. We were about out of money, and we went one time.
Yeah.
But
He played 4 years in high school, so.
Kept the roads hot, huh? Well,
you
my
ready for cobbler?
last thing is there anything you want to say to each other for the record?
I love you.
I love you.
Thanks for being my girl. Thanks for writing me the letter.
Thanks for the paycheck.
Well, thanks for the interview. You two
Yeah,
have been
thank you.
great.
Great.
Thank you very much.